Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about the 3 biggest failures of Creative Assembly in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Now, I am specifically talking about Immortal Empires, but it should be mentioned that the biggest failure of Warhammer 3 is with the Realms of Chaos campaign. The racial design didn't work, the core gameplay loop of Realms of Chaos didn't work on a campaign level, lots of design decisions that Creative Assembly has been spending years trying to fix. When the core gameplay is not necessarily well designed, it does end up hurting everything else, and we're still paying the price for that. Now, to be very clear on this, Creative Assembly could and should have done more. Since then, the fact that they didn't is in itself its own problem, but we'll get to that in a moment. But for Immortal Empires, I would start with the Tides of Torment DLC. Now, Tides of Torment is not a horrible DLC in quite a few ways. There's a bunch of cool units available. There's reworks for Norska, High Elves, and Slaanesh. There are question marks, especially regards to the High Elven rework, and Slaanesh has its own issues. But here's the problem with the Tides of Torment DLC. The big problem with this one is the length of time that we had to wait for it to be released. Because waiting a year, or very close to a year, for a DLC like this to actually come out is not really justifiable from my point of view. And that is the problem of the Tides of Torment DLC. It wasn't really a great DLC in a lot of ways. I would say the best part of the DLC is Norska in itself, though not sales campaign, and that's also pretty telling as far as I see it, because you would think that the paid Norskan DLC portion of it would be the best part of it, but really we've just basically gotten Trog the Troll King's campaign and not really a whole lot else. Really, like, you could talk about Wulfric, and yes, he does have a better campaign, but you can confederate Wulfric and get that teleportation mechanic, so what is the benefit in playing Wulfric as opposed to playing Trog and then confederating Wulfric in your campaign? Well, the answer to that is there's not much of a point, which, you know, is part of the problem. Then you look at the High Elven rework, or in Aislin's campaign, the limitations of that campaign, the pacing of the campaign. Very powerful Legendary Lord, cool final battle, but again, gameplay loop, same with the Kala, same with the Slaanesh rework. And if this had been a DLC that Creative Assembly had released in, say, 6 months, 4 months, 5 months, God forbid they would do a DLC in 4 months, but if they had done this DLC in 4 months, it would be a different discussion. But another thing I would like to point out on this subject, it has been 2 months, pretty much, since the release of this DLC, and there are issues still since launch to this point that they haven't fixed. Like, I just noticed a couple of days ago some people talking about, like, oh, you can save Björk Bearstruck as a legendary hero and load them up in another campaign. It's these kind of issues. Some issues are far bigger than that, for the record, absolutely. Like bugs, glitches, things breaking down constantly. And Creative Assembly was promising to talk about things in January. Well, January is over. We're in February. Only now they're promising that they're going to release 7.04. So it's the long waiting period of time, the actual design of the racial reworks, the design of the new campaigns, a lot of them at the very least, except the Mask. I think the only really good campaign out of that DLC is the Mask, because the Mask is not trying to reinvent the wheel of what the campaign should be and doing a poor job at it. You can make a unique campaign in a game, but not the way they handled it with the Tides of Torment aspect. Like, the Mask and Trog are by far, in a way, the best campaigns in the game from Tides of Torment. So, yes, I do think Tides of Torment, long waiting period, and a lot of the things they did with it leaves a lot to be desired. At number 2, we have Shadows of Change. What is there to be said about Shadows of Change that hasn't been already stated? Well, for starters, really, with regards to SOC as a DLC. It just failed to deliver a really good gameplay experience. It didn't rework the races, except a bit of stuff with Cafe. And so Creative Assembly had to spend quite a bit of time reworking Kislev later down the line. I gotta feel sorry for a CE Sofia team, at least with regards to that aspect, because having to spend time fixing stuff that should have been fixed with Shadows of Change was probably not what they had planned for with respect to everything. But here's the problems. Even with the Kislev rework, which did a lot for the race, the issues really remained with Shadows of Change. They had to spend a lot of time and a lot of patches doing new units, for instance, because people were very unhappy with the roster that Creative Assembly initially released. Then they had to rework Kislev, but issues still remain. Astankia, the Changeling, and even Jan Bo are not really great campaigns. I mean, Jan Bo is the most reasonable of the bunch, except he's in Lustria and all of the problems that come with that, and a dual star campaign leaves a lot to be desired. You'd be surprised how much better this campaign is if you just literally change the starting position from Lustria to Cafe. Yes, you still have to go to Lustria to, do your campaign objective, but it's kind of saying a lot that his campaign can be substantially better through a change of starting position. Some have argued that the Changelings campaign could be better with a choice of where you decide to start your campaign, but the problem with the Changeling has to do with the fact that it's a nothing campaign, really, by all means, on the subject. It's a kind of campaign that really doesn't have a whole lot on offer. You play it once, and even playing it once to completion, that is not necessarily the best campaign experience that you could ever have, because yeah, you do have some cool battles here and there, but the actual system of schemes leaves a lot to be desired when they don't break down on you. The fact that many times, at least with some of these schemes, like I look at Norska and Kislev schemes in particular, the fact that many times when you're looking at these kind of schemes, they do end up bugging out and you have no way of completing them. And the fact that you're playing essentially an interim button simulator type campaign, or Jan Bo spending time in Lustria, or that Astankia is you're spending a lot of time with Astankia just going every turn, making a bunch of buffs and debuffs. You don't even care about them, you just click the button because you need to fill up your meter at the top. That is really a fundamental failure. And then one shouldn't forget the fact that Shadows of Change did bring with it a price increase. Sure, Forge of Castors did it first. Forge of Castors was a race pack. But when they put the same price for a Lord pack, and combined with everything else that happened in the time period, yeah, Shadows of Change is a gigantic disaster. Not the biggest issue, I would say, for Immortal Empires, but for them as the game developer, combined with Pharaoh Dynasties, combined with the cancellation of Hyenas, it's one of the biggest, or triple disaster as I call it, the biggest disaster, one of the biggest disasters in gaming history. The only reason it's not there at the top in modern gaming history, when we're talking about everything post-ET as a video game, is because Concord came out. But being number 2 or 3, depending on how you want to view it, is not exactly a glamorous spot for Creative Assembly. So this DLC was, actually everything that happened in this time period was a significant failure for them as a company. Really bad decisions, and one would have thought they would have learned their lesson, and with Thrones of Decay it seemed they had, until they did Tides of Torment. I mean, it's better, I guess, but still. And then finally, at number 1 is Creative Assembly's inability or unwillingness to fix many long-standing issues in the game. This, by far and away, is the biggest failure for Creative Assembly in Total War Warhammer 3. Consider the example of Tyrion. His quest item, yes, his quest item that requires him to take the Phoenix Gate, but because Alariel typically takes that Phoenix Gate herself, his inability to get that quest item for a very long time, or just quest items in general, bugs with sieges, the gate bug in sieges, the many issues with lords, with heroes, with campaigns, with battle issues. All of these things, some of these from the very launch of not just Immortal Empires, but the very launch of the game that Creative Assembly has not resolved to this day, is very telling. Now, modders have not been able to resolve all of these issues if you look at the community bug fix mod. But the fact that the community bug fix mod was able to vastly improve the game in many aspects and fix many of these long-standing issues indicates that it's not a problem of being able to fix these issues in the first place. It's an unwillingness or inability, depending on how you want to view it, of Creative Assembly to tackle these kind of long-standing issues with Warhammer 3. And that is a really, really big problem for them as a company. In fact, last year, the fact that the AI, the campaign AI of the game, literally got broken for both Lizardmen and Tomb Kings, creating a vast amount of community backlash for Creative Assembly as a company, is fairly telling. And the reason there was such a backlash is not because so many people necessarily cared so much about Tomb Kings or Lizardmen themselves being broken. Obviously, people did. But it was just kind of like the final drop in the bucket for a vast number of players. Because, again, lots of issues. Sieges, battles in general, field battles and siege battles in general. Campaign AI, scalability, difficulty, and so on and so forth. And they keep releasing content and never fixing problems with that content. There's issues. Even in Thrones of Decay, there are issues. Hell, there's issues in Warriors of Chaos or Champions of Chaos as the DLC. There's still issues that have persisted for years. And that's where people get sick and tired of it. I've seen many games with good fan bases, large numbers of active players, where the developers took their sweet ass time fixing fundamental issues or never fixed them, and guess what happens? They die. Slowly, but they do, inevitably. And this is actually what's been happening with Warhammer 3 as of late. Yes, the player numbers, the current players on Steam look decent enough, and they don't seem to have dropped that much, but one of the things people shouldn't ignore is how more widely available Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires has become with the change they made last December, where you don't even need to own Warhammer 3 to play Immortal Empires. And in spite of that, while the player count did jump by a significant amount, more than doubled, it didn't last. And it's actually going down. So lengthy periods of time waiting for updates, DLCs, and issues that never get fixed by Creative Assembly. And my point is on this. Really, maybe Creative Assembly doesn't care about the state of Warhammer 3. Maybe it's become a testing ground for them to use for new ideas. But here's the thing. I am sure Creative Assembly has this mentality, if you will, that, well, we don't need to care too much about Warhammer 3 because 40k is coming out, Medieval 3 is coming out. But just because you have a new game coming out does not mean you're going to handle things different. I've seen this with a vast amount of people in real life as well. They do a bunch of stupid shit, and when the bill comes due, they just ignore it. And maybe, you know, they maybe poison their relationships at work, for instance. I'll use this as an example. They poison their working environment. They turn everyone against them, and what do? They move on to the next big project or next big workplace. But here's the thing. All of that incurs a debt. Maybe people don't realize what you've done in the new workplace, but your attitude will be carrying over, and when it does carry over, if you never fundamentally change course, it will happen again and again. And that's the final point on why these kind of things matter. It doesn't matter strictly about Warhammer 3. It matters for CA as a whole, as a company. And I don't think they're learning that lesson, that they can't just keep doing this stuff. And Warhammer 3 is not even the first game they've done it. In fact, I know this is going to sound shocking, but Warhammer 3 in many ways, for all the issues I have with it, and this is why it's so frustrating, because it is actually one of the best Total War games, if not the best Total War game they've released. But they still haven't changed course on those fundamental issues that have existed for well over a decade. In fact, we can look back at Rome 1 and Medieval 2. Don't think that those games were perfect. They were not. But it was a different situation, and people were willing to ignore those things. But CA never adjusted, never really fully committed to changing course as a company because they felt that it was good enough. Well, good enough might work to a degree or another, but eventually it stops working, especially in the current gaming marketplace. Like, that's something else to point out. A failure of a gaming company right now doesn't look the way it did years ago. In this day and age, gamers have proven time and again that if you try and treat them as you did 5-6 years ago, they're just gonna stop. They're gonna vote with their wallet. We used to joke about like voting with our wallets. It's like because a lot of people assumed it would never happen. It has been happening, and the disasters have been gigantic. You look at Stormgate, you look at Wildgate, you look at Concord, you look at many games. Like, Ashes of Creation just got destroyed yesterday, 2 days ago, whatever. We are in a different market right now, and I do hope Creative Assembly understands this, or else things are not going to go so well for them. Costin signing out. Stay tuned for more.